Hey, good evening, and welcome to Live at 5, another live feed from me, Steve Gaskell, with regards to, I guess, some of the challenges that we are facing currently with the, I guess, the coronavirus and particularly business during lockdown. So today, I just want to share with you, I guess, a few ideas in regards to the virtual business lockdown. And I think it's safe to say that during this period of time, lockdown has come with its challenges. And, what are we now into week 6? So, a month and a half of being locked down and having to run our businesses in this way. And, how productive have you been? How well have you been able to, to manage to cope to, I don't know, maintain an air of business as usual? Now, I appreciate there are businesses out there that, you've not going to been able to do this, to have kept that air of normality. If you're in the leisure industry or the, restaurants, hotels, I get it, I understand that. But then there are other businesses that might well have knee-jerked very slightly at the beginning of this challenging period and found themselves in a place where actually, there is a way we can engage with the lockdown, and we can still maintain an air of our business in this virtual world. And I think the point to remember on this one, when you look at this in the context of your business, is that there should and needs to be a focus on how do I do business virtually, and how do I do it well. So I want to take you through a few areas today, just to engage and get you thinking about. But the first one I want to talk about before we really dive into this one is understanding the impact of this, understanding the impact of your team now feeling maybe an element of fear, anxiety, and worry, and certainly an element of isolation. Now, last week I did lockdown leadership, and I raised the point there that as leaders, it's no longer just a case of that leadership is an area of isolation, but actually now the physical focus on being isolated as a leader. There's a focus there and something to think about how you as an individual can deal with that. Now, in the same context, your team may well have gone from an office environment to now working at home. Now, whether they're working at home or furloughed, I would suggest that as a business owner, an executive, a managing director, whatever position you hold with your team, is to make sure that you're still engaging with them. Just because they're furloughed doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to them, doesn't mean that you shouldn't have some form of engagement with them throughout the week, whatever that looks like. The point of reference here is, what do you do to maintain that level of engagement with your team? And that's kind of important. The other side of it here is that they are alone. So as a business owner, what do you do to make sure that they are productive? Because that productivity can help with that fearful anxiety and worry and mindset. It can help people get through that without doubt. So you've got to be tuned in and aware of the fact that your people are working in isolation potentially. They're working from their homes. They are probably fearful just in terms of the circumstances and what we're seeing on the news and how we're each of us are responding to that is different. So you've got to be compassionate in that respect. You've got to be you don't even need to be empathetic. You can be sympathetic towards the fact that we're in this together. And actually, if you think about it in that respect, being in it together is probably one of the really easiest ways of actually working through this particular challenge. So, virtual business, teams working from maybe home locations, having to respect social distancing so that they're not actually working or able to engage with their work colleagues, family, and friends. So it has an impact. So you've got to be compassionate towards that and understand it. Understanding that is one aspect. The next bit that I'd like to talk about really is the fact of the matter is that we are still in a business, and I get it that there are high street businesses that have had to shut down, retail businesses that have had to shut down, But we've talked about the pivot. We talked about what is it that we can do. Where can we shift our business model? Whatever business model is, are there areas in which we can start to focus on what we can do? And I know there are some of you out there right now that will say, well, I can't. I'm a hairdresser. I'm a beauty therapist. I'm a pub landlord, and I understand. But even then, I've heard tell of businesses that have managed to shift and utilize the virtual scenario to do something, in some cases complementary to business, in other cases completely different. So that's going to be down to you to answer that question. And by the way, as you're watching this, if you've got any comments, drop the comments in. We'll try and grab the live comments as we can. I'll certainly go back and seek to answer any comments that we get as a result of this video going up. And where I can, I will help. I've said before, I'm doing 5 hours of pro bono work every week for at least 5 businesses who would like some coaching support through this, and that's something that I'm giving. So if you're somebody who is struggling to answer this question right now, then you've got nothing to lose but put an hour in the diary with me and have a conversation. But that next fact then, the next fact is really, it's about the execution side of life. And this is really about how do we maintain the execution of the business? How do I actually make business work in that respect? And there's 3 areas here. The 3 areas, what management do we need to put in place, what systems, and the planning side of life. And I'll tackle each one in turn. So the first one is it's about management and management process. On one of my last videos, I talked about lockdown leadership and how we lead our team. But when we're looking at the virtual business, we need to make sure that we've got robust management process in place. So right now, what management structure have you got that is working, in context to being a virtual business? Right now, what are you focusing on in terms of how you're going to deliver your management process, in some form of error or normality, when actually we're now working at distance under the virtual context? There's something I want to share in the first instance, and it absolutely, you can put management in place to get your team through this. And in some instances, you're going to need to actually, because this is going to be new to a lot of people, you're going to need to put an element of micromanagement in place. Now, before you all get up in arms and say, I'm not a micromanager, I don't do micromanaging, I want you to think of it in a slightly different context, because most people get micromanagement wrong in the context they think about. They just assume straight away it's about being dictatorial, or about being having someone do what they say they're going to do when they by the numbers, if you will. And there is an element of that. But the reality on this is about 2 things. When we look at micromanaging people, it's about competence and confidence. So your team, as we've already said, are going to be probably experiencing an element of fear, feeling isolated and alone. So they're going to have a dip in their confidence. They might also have a dip in their competence in terms of some of the different technology that you're going to have to start using to get your team through this, as we're doing today. Go to webinars, Zoom, videos, live feeds, you name it. There's lots of different ways in which you can start to utilize this virtual means. So the point here is that if you've got to then start to build their competence, and by building their competence, you start to build their confidence, you can micromanage them to a point where they don't need management in that same context. But be under no illusion that right now, if you've got people in there and you can see that they're struggling, they're not at their normal productive self, and their execution is dropping off, then you need to put those robust systems in place. And what does that look like for you when you start to think about this in the context of actually putting micromanagement in place? It's understanding the difference between the 2. So the micromanagement is one aspect of this in terms of creating a high level of productivity. But then when you think about it, what are the other management areas of focus that you can put in? What reports do you need to have in? What returns do you need to know? In terms of what are the processes that your team have got to actually adhere to. So the second point on this one is really then when we start to look at systemization. And this links closely into management because we now need to put some new systems in place, some new management systems in place. And the easiest way to look at this is how do you structure the engagement with your team? So when you were working in an office together, whatever your business circumstances was, the people came into work, you knew they were at work. There might be a case that you've got to think about actually putting in place timesheets again. That's not to be micromanaging, but it's actually efficiencies. It's making sure your people are doing what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it. That's one system that you could put in place. There are, again, various systems off the shelf that you could get where people can log in. The fact of the matter is that you again, you've got to remember profit and cost here. Just because people are working from home now, just because they are isolated, doesn't mean they shouldn't be any less productive. If they're working from home and they've still got a level of engagement, you're still going to be paying them a wage, and in return for that, the fair transaction is the value that you get back. Now, when they come to your place of work, you know when they arrive, you know when they stop for lunch, you know when they come back for lunch. So it's a system that you can put in place. The other systems that you can put in place are about communications. So what are you doing to bring the team together on maybe on a Monday morning at the beginning of the week to engage the team in a way that you can see that actually we know what's been planned for the week ahead. Some people call it the huddle. So are we doing a weekly huddle? So on a Monday we do a huddle. It might be that you do a major huddle on a Monday morning, and then you look at the rest of the week and you do short huddles. Each day you just have a come together, or it might be departmental, and they come together and they check what has been agreed, where they are, and what they're doing. But the point is here that you start to agree what is going to be done on a daily basis throughout the week. The other area of this one is something where then you can educate your team, and your team need to then start planning every day. And the easiest way to look at that is every day they set a list of, well, actually the night before, they set a list of goals that they're going to achieve for that day. Daily goal setting. So planning tomorrow today is kind of like what we're talking about here. So what is it they need to do at the end of every day? The last thing they do before they finish is spend 15 to 20 minutes planning tomorrow. But they're able to plan in some detail of exactly what it is they're going to achieve through the day. This isn't a long old list of stuff to do. It's not in your notebook and we're just writing it down, because that's not very productive. It's limiting on execution. Because if you're one of those people, I guarantee you're still working on stuff from last week in the list. Whereas when we start to plan tomorrow today, when we start to look at this in terms of putting together a goal setting agenda, what are we going to achieve each day in terms of our goals? The big difference there is you start to realize exactly what you can achieve on a daily basis. Now, I'll be also very interested to see that, and I've already seen this, a lot of people have been a lot more productive working from home. And that's why this virtual is the new norm. Now, when we look at coming back to work and back to what we would deem as this era of normality at the end of this, the reality is there's probably going to be some time where actually people are going to want, or you're going to want your people to work from home because you've seen a higher level of productivity. So planning tomorrow today is one of the key elements there. And there's a fair bit of focus you can do on that. The next piece is then, if you're doing your Monday meeting, you need to make sure as a business owner that, okay, who do I need to catch up with, a third, 2/3 through the week? So it might be on a Thursday morning, you set time in your calendar, your schedule to then go and check on people, check on your team in terms of making sure that the big goals that have been set for the week are on track. Thursday is done because it then still leaves them Friday to get the job done. So you can have a look at what that looks like in terms of going forward. What is it going to be with regards to that level of focus. Now, one thing you can bring in, which again, as a structured meeting, again, it's an informative meeting for you as a business owner. It's not where we go into fine detail. It's called a lion meeting. If you've got your pen on you, write this down. It's last week, issues, opportunities, next week. last week, issues, opportunities next week. And the idea being here is that each of your team in turn then just tell me, the salient points. What did they do last week? Not war and peace, but this is what I said I would do. This is what happened. Then they may have some issues, in which case, I could use some help on these issues. This is some stuff that came up which I was unable to deal with. Could I have some help on this? And then the opportunities. This week, I've had these opportunities come in that I'd like to share with the group. And then the final piece is a commitment to next week. Next week, this is what I'm saying I'm doing. So this is a great Friday meeting. So on a Friday, you structure your line meeting, maybe mid-morning or something like that. Everyone's there. Anything that has to come away from the meeting, you then decide to deal with away from the meeting. You don't do it in the meeting. That's the critical focus here. Otherwise, they'll take the whole of Friday and you'll get nothing done. One of the great points with the line meeting, and to be fair, if you haven't been doing anything like this in your business up until this point, and this sounds like a good idea to bring into your business context right now, keep it. As soon as you come back to that era of normality, keep your line meetings in there. Keep this structured, this systems approach in your business. Because these are great systems to have in your business in terms of increasing productivity, 100%. So, the other one that you can bring in there, and it's whether you bring this in weekly or monthly, again, I recommend 40 minutes a week, where you maybe bring a department together, or you bring department heads together, or you bring the business team together. And it's called the Problem Workshop. The Problem Workshop. And again, there's a system. It's really, really good at uncovering opportunity. So the Problem Workshop is really a case of the very first time you do it, you just ask the team in 5 minutes, list all the problems that we are engaged with and suffering and have within the business right now that you know of, and you whiteboard them. So the same type of context as I'm doing with you today, you can be talking to the team on the video, and then you can whiteboard them. Or you can use the chat, and people just type into the chat what it is that they've come across and what the problems are. Once you've got this list, and you will end up with a list of problems, which will be kind of a little bit shocking that first time you do it. But you've got this list of problems, and you then determine, right, okay, what are we going to deal with? What problems are we going to actually deal with here? How do we then prioritize them? And at the end of again another 5 minutes or so, you'll list in priority which we're dealing with. And you go to the team and say, right, which ones are we going to deal with today? So for the next 40 to 50 minutes, you'll deal with 1, maybe 2 problems. And in that time, you come up with a solution. Now, the real magic for the Problem Workshop comes here. If you imagine, and let's say you've got 48 working weeks in the year, if you imagine that every week you conduct a problem workshop and you're able to solve, let's say, just 1 problem per week, and in a year you're able to solve 48 problems, what is your business going to look like? So you can start to see that even though we're in this virtual business world at the moment where we're having to do things differently, the reality on this is actually you can bring in some really good strategies and focus in your business to have a massive impact. And do think about that. Because these are the opportunities that you want to be thinking about. These are, where you can make a big difference. So that's a little bit on systemization and putting the managerial processes in place and how those two can work together. The next piece is really about then the planning side of life. So what do we need to do and focus in terms of the plan? Now, over the last few weeks, I've been working with a number of businesses in terms of putting plans together and then looking at how we're executing those plans. We're 6 weeks into this now. We can already see around the world that other countries are, maybe ahead of us, but they're looking at some form and era of return to normality. You now need to be planning. You've got your 90-day plan. You've got a crisis plan in place. You may need to plan some of these actions. But then now we need to be thinking about what is the next step? How are we going to make sure that we come back, to this, to business? What do we need to put in place? What are the plans that I need to put in place? What do I need to think about? You might be a business that's going to have to start thinking about the social distancing. If you are one of the leisure industry businesses, that maybe a gym, could be a restaurant, bar. What about the no touch? people might not want to touch. So, with picking up menus or the whole raft of new things that are going to be of concern to people. So what do I need to plan in order to think about those now? Now, here's an interesting one. If you are one of those businesses that has been impacted significantly and haven't had a choice but to keep shut, now you want to start thinking about, how am I coming back to life? And again, throughout all of these webinars that I'm doing, all of these live sessions I'm doing, the one thing that I'll say every time is, start to think about, what do I need to do to come back stronger? That's going to be one of the real key aspects of making sure you come back to this stronger than when you went in. Okay, I want to spend about the last 9 minutes or so talking about how we empower our people. I think this is a really important one. So firstly, for your business owners, for you executives, for your managing directors, the first thing that I would say is, don't engage with superhero complex here. When you were in your business and you had your team around you, were you the one that used to put your cape on and run and solve every problem? Were you the one that had this open door policy where anybody can come into your office and they can have a conversation? The point here is, superhero complex is harder to work from a distance because you can't get there to solve the problems. So how can we start to empower our people? Well, as we've already talked about, there's an area there where you can focus on in terms of, the micromanaging is one way to get the competence and confidence back up again. And the meetings can get, people engaged and making sure that we're talking and, we're bringing regular conversations in. And the point here is then, actually, what do I need to do for like lunch breaks? Could we have virtual lunch breaks together? I know there are businesses that work across international divides, so could we have a virtual brunch? Are there, Tuesdays where you can give your team a bit of time on a Tuesday where they can choose what they need to work on in order to bring value into the business? That could be anything. One of my clients works on a great focus. They've got Friday Day. So actually on a Friday, you bring an idea to the table and you can work on it to present it to the team. The team like it and everyone gets it, then we're going. Great ways to empower the team. So the other point here, and again, it goes back to the superhero complex, where you are not going to be able to deal with everything that is being presented to you. The way in which you can empower your team really simply is by asking questions. Now, I have a focus here on two sides of questions. When you ask a question, you want to be asking a learning question. That's the first thing. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment, give you a bit more detail on it. Sadly, all too often what we end up asking is judging questions. And the first type of question that we come into asking, a judging question, is often why. Why haven't you done that? Why haven't we responded to to our customer? Why haven't we actually delivered this? Why hasn't that gone out? Why hasn't this been done? And all you do is you create an emotive response straight away. And the second we engage somebody's emotion, doesn't matter how we try to phrase it, the second we engage that emotion, we then end up with excuses. We end up with blame and we end up with denial. That's not empowering. That's not going to empower anybody. So you've got to take a moment. You've got to take a breath before you respond. And there's a great strategy that you can do. That if something presents itself, and your knee-jerk reaction is that you're going to go into a why judging question scenario, is to just say to the party, say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to take 15 minutes just so I can think about this. Then I'm going to come back to you with what my thoughts are. Or I'm going to take an hour because I need to think about this for an hour. So there isn't it's programming your mind to not necessarily jump straight into it. Because guess what? When you react, when you dive into a judging question, that's your emotions responding, not your logic. And in times of lockdown, we need to be logical. We need to make sure that we're engaging our thought process before we just engage our voice. So we need to park the judging questions and we need to be focused on what the learning opportunity is here. So the second piece here is asking learning questions. So a learning question is really getting to the bottom of what's the opportunity here. And these are how and what type of questions. Now, one of the things that when you start to really engage this in terms of actually getting your team starting to focus on the learning questions, is you start to empower them. But you've got to know when you need to answer a question, and there will be occasions where you need to answer a question. You've got to know when you need to nurture the answer from your team. In other words, okay, so they present you a question and you're able to come back to and say, okay, so if we did X, what would happen? If we did Y, what would happen? Okay, X and Y, which one do you think is the better one to go for? All right, so you say X. All right, what's the merits of X? Okay, what about if you did Y? Is that any different? You can almost coach them through to the answer without giving them the answer. Again, huge empowerment. The other one is then you can also turn around to them and say, actually, that question you need to bring to the management meeting on Friday, to the Lion meeting, well, not necessarily, but the management meeting on Monday. So you've got to think about what's the learning opportunity here. Now, the other thing when you ask one of these questions is they've got to really have three key components to it. Your learning question needs to be forward focused. So it's always about where we're going. It's not anchored to where we've been. Don't ask, try responding to a question on the basis of actually something that has happened. That's unhelpful. Focusing where we're going and what we want to do. It's not helpful to turn around and say, oh, well, we haven't done that and we haven't done this, and that's all in the past. You can't influence it. It's not a problem we can fix, so why worry about it? The focus here is that it's forward focusing. We're forward focused on where we want to get to, and that again is empowering. The next piece said that it's actually got a time frame to it. So it's forward focusing, and then we're actually making sure that we're putting a time frame to it. That in the next 10 minutes, in the next hour, in the next day, that we're able to then get that level of momentum going forward. So it's firstly forward focused, it's time frame, and it's details orientated. So what is it you need to do, by when? What are the the details that we need to make sure that we're passing on, by when? So with just a few shifts in habit and bringing some fresh habits to what we're doing at the moment, we can empower our people. And I think the point to remember is that we are, in challenging times. But it doesn't mean that we can't make the most out of this. We've just got to start to think slightly differently in terms of how we're going to engage our people. We've got to think in terms of the execution. We've got to think in terms of the management process that we're using. What management tools can we use? Where do we need to then put systemization in? And what planning do we need to do? Hey, if this has been vaguely helpful, please drop us a comment down, and please share it with as many businesses out there that your business colleagues, your friends. Just let's get the word out there. I know there's a lot of good stuff going out there, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing that I hope to just offer that level of value. If you're somebody that wants to have a conversation, and I mentioned the 5 hours of pro bono, then just drop me a message. I will be delighted to get involved, to come and help, and to take you through what we can in terms of helping you get to the other end. So that's all I've got to say for today. I'd like to share that one with you, and leave you on this note. This is the new norm, and we do need to embrace it, and we do need to make the most from it. Thanks a lot. My name's Steve Gaskell, and I hope that this has been useful.